Opening scene, August 7, 1942. Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. The black horizon of the South Pacific shimmered faintly under a moonless sky. At precisely 0214 hours, the stillness was broken as the landing craft of the U.S. Marine 1st Division pushed toward the beaches of Guadalcanal. The men inside carried the standard rifles of the day, garans and bars, but scattered among them were weapons that would completely rewrite the tactical playbook of jungle warfare. Some Marines cradled Winchester Model 12 pump-action shotguns, their blued steel barrels glinting faintly in the darkness. Few on either side knew it yet, but these shotguns would become some of the most feared weapons in the Pacific War. As the Marines waded ashore at Beach Red, Japanese doctrine was about to meet a brutal surprise. Tokyo's planners had imagined an enemy relying on rifles at distance and vulnerable to bayonet or sword when fighting up close. They had not accounted for a weapon that could unleash 9.33 caliber pellets with every pull of the trigger, nor for the devastating effect of slam fire, holding the trigger down and cycling the action to spew shells as fast as human muscle could pump. Within hours of landfall, the first skirmishes near the Lunga River revealed the catastrophic flaw in Japan's assumptions. The Imperial Army's 2,200 defenders were equipped and trained for a style of combat that simply did not match the weaponry the Americans had brought ashore. What followed would permanently shift the mathematics of close combat in the Pacific. The legacy of the trench guns. To understand why the Japanese were so unprepared, one must first look back to World War I. In the trenches of France, American troops had shocked German soldiers with the brutal effectiveness of shotguns in close quarters. The Winchester Model 1897 and early Model 12 proved so deadly that in September 1918, the German government lodged a formal protest, delivered via Switzerland, claiming the use of shotguns violated the Hague Convention's ban on weapons causing unnecessary suffering. Berlin went so far as to declare that any captured American carrying a shotgun could be executed. The United States rejected the protest outright. Secretary of State Robert Lansing warned Germany that any such executions would be met with reprisals in kind. No executions took place, and the shotgun's reputation as a terror weapon was sealed. By 1942, that memory lingered. The U.S. military knew the Model 12 was not merely a hunting gun repurposed for war. It was a tool uniquely suited to close-range destruction, especially in environments where visibility and distance meant little. Engineering a battlefield beast. The Winchester Model 12, first introduced in 1912 for sportsmen, had been transformed into the M12 trench gun for the battlefield. Unlike civilian versions with long barrels for hunting, the trench model carried a 20-inch cylinder bore barrel, optimized for short, brutal engagements. It featured a perforated heat shield to protect hands from barrel heat, and a bayonet lug to mount the fearsome M1917 bayonet. But its most significant trait was mechanical, the absence of a trigger disconnector. This meant that if a Marine held down the trigger while working the pump, the shotgun would fire each time the action slammed forward. Slam fire. In skilled hands, 6 shells could be discharged in under 3 seconds. Each shell held 9 pellets. That was 54 projectiles saturating the target zone before a Japanese rifleman could chamber his second round. At close range, inside 25 yards, nothing else in the Marine arsenal delivered such overwhelming lethality. Japanese doctrine meets reality. The Imperial Japanese Army had built its doctrine around 2 tactical pillars: night combat and close combat spirit. Kishu, night surprise attacks, small, stealthy infiltrations designed to exploit American nervousness in darkness. Kyoshu, night force attack, full-scale Banzai charges under cover of night, relying on shock and the bayonet. Training manuals claimed that Americans lacked courage in hand-to-hand fighting and depended too much on machines. To Japanese planners, overwhelming spirit, swords, and bayonets would crush the fragile morale of Western soldiers. The early victories of 1941 to 42 seemed to confirm this. In Singapore, Japanese forces using night infiltration overwhelmed the numerically superior British. In the Philippines, they swept aside American and Filipino defenses with aggressive close combat. But Guadalcanal would challenge these assumptions brutally. Baptism of fire, the Battle of the Tenaru. On the night of August 21, 1942, Colonel Kaineo Ichiki led over 900 men of his detachment in a daring assault across the sandbar at the Ilu, often called the Tenaru River. This was the very scenario Japanese doctrine envisioned. A night crossing, close combat, bayonet to bayonet. But the Marines were ready. Behind barbed wire and sandbags, machine guns, mortars, and artillery roared. Yet among these weapons, the shotguns proved especially deadly in the final moments, when Japanese attackers pushed through to within yards of the Marine lines. After-action reports noted how point defense Marines armed with Model 12s shredded entire rushes of attackers, firing not at individual targets but into the massive movement. Out of Ichiki's 916 men, around 800 were killed. The slaughter revealed that spirit alone could not overcome modern close-range firepower. The science of death, why the Model 12 worked. The U.S. Army Ordnance Department had studied the ballistic properties of buckshot long before Guadalcanal. Standard .00 buckshot shells contained 9.33 caliber pellets. At 20 yards, those pellets could penetrate 3/4 of an inch of pine board, roughly equivalent to human bone. At that same range, the spread widened to nearly 30 inches, ensuring that a Marine didn't need perfect aim to hit his mark. In dense jungle, where soldiers might glimpse only a flicker of movement, that spread pattern was priceless. The slam fire capability multiplied this lethality. Post-war tests proved that an experienced operator could fire 5 to 6 shells in under 3 seconds. In effect, at point-blank range, a single Marine armed with a Model 12 could outmatch multiple enemies simultaneously, achieving a suppressive effect normally associated with automatic weapons. Jungle warfare, adaptation and innovation. Through 1942 and 1943, as fighting spread across the Solomon Islands and into New Georgia, Marines developed specific tactics for the shotgun. Point man's weapon. Shotguns were often issued to the lead scout on jungle patrols. In the event of ambush, that Marine could instantly blast a corridor of fire, breaking the ambush before it fully developed. Night infiltration defense. Shotguns became the frontline weapon in perimeter defense. Japanese infiltrators creeping through grass or jungle at night often triggered shotgun blasts aimed at sound or movement, not visual targets. Ricochet shooting. Marines discovered that firing at the ground could create lethal ricochets, striking crawling enemies and sending pellets into low cover. Vegetation clearing. In the thick Pacific foliage, Marines sometimes used birdshot or buckshot to shred cover, exposing Japanese snipers hidden in trees or bushes. By mid-war, the Model 12 was no longer just a weapon of opportunity. It was a deliberately assigned tactical tool, given to Marines and soldiers expected to face the closest, deadliest fighting. Expanding the battlefield. Tarawa, 1943. The invasion of Tarawa in November 1943 showcased new tactical challenges. The Japanese had fortified the atoll with bunkers and trenches designed to survive bombardment. The close-quarters fighting on the beaches turned the Model 12 into a critical breaching weapon. Shotgun blasts tore through sandbagged openings, and Marines reported using buckshot to flush Japanese soldiers out of dugouts before tossing grenades inside. Though Tarawa is remembered for its high casualty rate and chaotic landings, it also highlighted how indispensable the shotgun had become in amphibious assaults, where combat quickly collapsed into brutal room-to-room or bunker-to-bunker fighting. Toward the Cave Wars. By late 1943, Japanese defense strategy evolved again. Learning from their defeats in the Solomons, they shifted from relying on Banzai charges to constructing deep cave fortifications. These systems, which would culminate in the horrors of Peleliu, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa, forced Americans into the very sort of close-range assaults where the Model 12 excelled. Marines developed cave-clearing drills. Fire 2 shotgun blasts into the opening, let pellets ricochet in the dark, then follow with grenades or flamethrowers. Survivors often described the ricocheting pellets inside rock chambers as terrifying beyond description, creating a metallic scream as fragments bounced off stone in every direction. The shotgun was no longer just a weapon of killing, it was a weapon of psychological dominance. Production and distribution. Despite its fearsome reputation, the Model 12 was not mass-produced in the millions. Winchester records show that only about 61,000 new Model 12 trench guns were made for the U.S. military during World War II, plus about 19,000 refurbished. That was a tiny fraction compared to the 12 million Americans in uniform. This scarcity meant the Model 12 was concentrated in select roles: Marine rifle companies, Army assault teams, Navy shipguards, and even Army Air Force base security. The ammunition, however, was plentiful. Millions of shells were manufactured in 00 buckshot, slug, and specialty loads. Marines typically carried 50 to 60 rounds in belts or bandoliers, though resupply was always a concern given the bulk of shells compared to rifle cartridges. Limitations and countermeasures. As devastating as it was, the shotgun was not perfect. Its effective range rarely exceeded 50 yards. Against Japanese rifles firing from longer distances, shotgun-armed Marines were vulnerable. Ammunition was heavy, limiting how much a man could carry. And the Pacific environment, salt air, humidity, sand, demanded constant cleaning and oiling to keep the weapon operational. The Japanese experimented with crude countermeasures. Some units tried improvised body armor of wood or bamboo, but these only partially worked, and buckshot still caused disabling injuries. They also adapted tactics, building deeper defensive networks to force Americans to fight outside shotgun range whenever possible. But none of these innovations fully neutralized the shotgun's dominance in close quarters. When the dust of the Pacific battles began to settle, the Winchester Model 12 had already carved a legend for itself. Its role had never been about dominating the battlefield like the M1 Garand or the .50 caliber Browning. Instead, the Model 12 thrived in the spaces between, inside dark caves, in tangled jungle trails, and during tense night defenses where the enemy was more shadow than soldier. The weapon's value lay in its simplicity and brutal effectiveness. A pump-action 12-gauge trench gun was not designed for long-range duels or precision marksmanship. It was designed for survival when the enemy was less than 20 yards away. In those moments, where hesitation could mean death, a shotgun offered something unique. Overwhelming firepower delivered instantly. Tactical strengths and weaknesses. In specific scenarios, cave clearing, jungle ambushes, and sudden night assaults, the shotgun became a lifeline. A Marine could fire a spread of buckshot without perfect aim, devastating any attacker who broke cover at close range. In the chaos of the Pacific jungle, where visibility was often measured in feet rather than yards, this forgiveness factor gave Americans a significant edge. But its strengths were matched by limitations. Open terrain stripped the weapon of its advantage. Against well-built Japanese bunkers where defenders fired through tiny apertures, the Model 12 was less effective. Logistics also played a part. Delivering specialized ammunition like shotgun shells into frontline islands already strained supply chains. Compared to the standard .30-06 rifle round, shotgun ammo was heavier, bulkier, and less efficient to transport in large quantities. And yet, the fact that the United States could afford to supply even a limited number of shotguns reveals something far larger: industrial dominance. The industrial divide. Between 1941 and 1945, the United States manufactured over 60,000 combat-ready Model 12s, while also producing millions of rifles, hundreds of thousands of machine guns, and tens of thousands of artillery pieces. For a weapon with such specialized utility, that number was astonishing. Japan, on the other hand, was struggling to provide even the basics. Early in the war, the Japanese Type 99 rifle was a well-crafted weapon, accurate and durable. But as resources dwindled, manufacturing quality plummeted. By 1945, Japanese soldiers were drilling with bamboo spears, while Americans were discarding any shotgun shell that showed the slightest hint of corrosion. This contrast wasn't just about weapons. It was about the ability to wage modern war. The Model 12 symbolized a military machine that could experiment with specialized tools, deploy them where effective, and never fear shortages. For the Japanese, every rifle cartridge was counted, every bullet irreplaceable. Innovation from the bottom up. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Model 12's wartime story was how its tactics evolved. Unlike rigid hierarchies that dictated doctrine from above, the American military often encouraged frontline adaptation. A Marine patrol that discovered a new trick, like ricocheting buckshot off cave walls to strike hidden defenders, could share that technique informally. Word spread across companies, then across battalions until it became standard practice. This skip-shooting tactic, born from necessity, became a hallmark of shotgun use in the Pacific. Another innovation was loading alternating shells, buckshot for groups of enemies, then slugs for single, tough targets. These were not ideas designed in some stateside training manual. They were the direct product of desperate men solving desperate problems. Here lay the real power of the Model 12. It was a platform for experimentation. A 30-year-old civilian hunting shotgun, repurposed into a weapon of war, taught an entire generation of soldiers that even old technology could be reimagined when the battlefield demanded it. Beyond the Pacific, Korea, and Vietnam, the Model 12 story did not end in 1945. When the frozen hills of Korea became the next battleground, the shotgun returned. Again, it proved deadly in trench raids and night fighting, where combat was often sudden and brutal at close range. In Vietnam, it became almost indispensable for point men leading patrols through thick jungle. Tunnel clearing, an eerie echo of Pacific cave fighting, brought the shotgun back to center stage. Marines carried the Model 12 into the labyrinth of Viet Cong tunnels, where every shadow could conceal a hidden enemy. What worked in the caves of Okinawa now worked beneath the jungles of Southeast Asia. By then, newer pump-action models had appeared, but the DNA of the Winchester 12 lived on. Its design, reliability, and slamfire capability influenced how modern military shotguns would be built. Human dimension, the men behind the weapon. Behind every statistic lies the Marine who chose to carry a shotgun into battle. For many, it was a deliberate choice. They traded the range of the M1 Garand for a weapon that gave them supreme confidence in the chaos of close combat. Slam firing, a technique where the trigger was held down and the action pumped rapidly, required physical strength, endurance, and nerves of steel. In training, it looked easy. In combat, with sweat in your eyes, mud under your boots, and bullets snapping overhead, it was a true test of grit. Yet time and again, Marines and soldiers proved capable, turning the Model 12 into a fearsome tool of survival. Some swore by it. Others preferred the security of a rifle. But no one denied its psychological impact, both on the men who wielded it and the enemies who faced it. For Japanese soldiers, already steeped in the expectation of bayonet duels and rifle fire, the thunderous blast of buckshot at point-blank range was shattering. Lessons from the Model 12. The shotgun story reveals several enduring truths about warfare. Old technology can find new purpose. The Model 12 was designed decades before World War II, yet proved revolutionary when applied to new challenges. Innovation thrives under pressure. The best tactics were invented not by generals, but by exhausted Marines improvising in the field. Specialized weapons have value, but only with strong logistics. America could afford to field a weapon that was niche because its industrial base supported it. Training matters as much as technology. The shotgun's success depended on men who practiced, adapted, and trusted their weapon in life-or-death moments. A symbol of American adaptability. Ultimately, the Model 12 was never about numbers. With just over 61,000 produced during the war, it was a small fraction of U.S. firepower. Yet it symbolized something greater, the American ability to take any tool, refine its use, and integrate it into a broader system of overwhelming force. While submarines strangled Japanese supply lines, bombers leveled cities, and aircraft carriers projected naval dominance, the humble shotgun cleared the caves, bunkers, and ambush points that stood in the way of victory. Each position neutralized by a shotgun team meant fewer casualties, faster momentum, and one step closer to strategic objectives. For Japanese doctrine, which valued spiritual strength over material advantage, the shotgun was a rude awakening. It embodied a mindset alien to their warrior tradition: pragmatism over ideology, firepower over ritual, adaptation over rigidity. Legacy. Even decades later, the lessons endure. U.S. forces in modern conflicts still employ shotguns for breaching, close-quarters battle, and specialized scenarios. The DNA of the Winchester Model 12 lives on in every pump action carried by today's infantrymen. More importantly, its story reminds us that war is not just fought with the newest, most advanced weapons. Sometimes, victory comes from reimagining the familiar, pushing it into roles never intended, and trusting the ingenuity of the men on the ground. In the Pacific jungles, the Winchester Model 12 did exactly that. Its pump action cycle, echoing through caves and palm forests, became a soundtrack of innovation. For the Marines who carried it, it was more than steel and wood, it was survival. For the Japanese who faced it, it was the sound of inevitability. The Model May 12th never have been the most famous weapon of World War II, but it remains one of the most revealing. It showed how an industrial democracy could mobilize, adapt, and innovate in ways no opponent had prepared for. And in that lesson lies its true legacy. Not just a shotgun, but a symbol of a nation's ability to turn even the simplest tool into an instrument of victory.